Hey guys, it's Charles and welcome to Good Clinical, a podcast and YouTube channel dedicated to showcasing the future of medicine and human health. Today's episode is another in our partnership with Te Titoki Mataora, the MedTech Research Translator. Today's guest is Dr. Grace Walker, a co-founder and chief regulatory officer at Tautoko Tech, a medical device company developing a patch insulin pump with wraparound support and education software. Dr. Grace Walker, great to have you on the podcast today.
Kia ora, Charles. Thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I'm Dr. Grace. I am the Chief Regulatory Officer of Tautoko Tech. I'm a Ngāti Kahu Nunu, Minaro Hinirangi Oku Iwi. So I'm a North Islander girl based down here in Otautahi, Christchurch, where I work with a lot of my founders. And I guess I'm a mega nerd and just super passionate about everything we're working on at Tautoko Tech.
Excellent. So what is Tautoko Tech? Why don't we get straight into it, Dr. Grace? What is Tautoko Tech and the problem that you are solving?
Well, I guess in a nutshell, if we're going to get nitty gritty, at Tautoko Tech, we're focused on solving diabetes. So, what that might mean for someone who's diagnosed with diabetes is that when you're first diagnosed, particularly as an adult, you have to learn about how to use insulin, how to measure your glucose, and it is a huge, huge undertaking to just learn around your management as well as how to deliver your insulin. So, what we're doing is we're focusing on providing a patch pump that can be delivered on day one of diagnosis alongside support software. So that way, when you're going along with your nurse that's teaching you everything you need to know, when you go home, in your pocket, you also have that little app that says, hey, how are you doing? How are things going? Is there anything more you want to know? So that way you don't be all alone at home having to learn this. You know there's something that's sitting there in your pocket alongside you, and that can link in with your clinicians while easing that transition of learning how to inject yourself. So instead of having to wait for approximately a few months before you're even eligible for more training to get a very complicated device, we're saying, how about we take care of you from day one so you're not alone in this journey?
I see. Yeah, because the typical treatment approach is multiple injections of insulin a day, based on your requirements and your insulin levels, right? And the insulin pumps require a little bit more technical nous, or can be a little bit more tricky for a novice to manage, right? So the idea being that rather than have this burdensome requirement to multiple times a day stab yourself in the leg to get your insulin, let's just go with the more efficient approach and ameliorate the training and difficulties associated with that.
So essentially, this is what we are looking at in a nutshell. It's just a simple patch pump that will stick to your arm. And the idea that we are looking at is that it's a reusable brain and we will have ongoing consumables. So the needle in the cartridge gets replaced. But yeah, you will essentially have the brains that goes. What we're looking at is doing it for free. So that way it makes it far more accessible for people to uptake, because most devices in this space cost around $8,000 to $10,000. And so we are making sure we get rid of that barrier by at least giving our brain for free, so that it's our consumables that'll be the charge. So that's just one of those factors we're looking at about how to make tech more accessible into communities.
Excellent. So let's back up for a second and what got you interested in this space? Because, and what do we need to understand about, I suppose, diabetes to kind of better characterize the rest of this conversation? Before we get to that, what got you interested in this area of science?
Like I mentioned, I'm a mega nerd, so I'm actually a data scientist, and I met my other co-founder, Jake, who is from the far north in Te Raroa. He's an Otautahi boy as well, raised here. But we met through the Māori and Indigenous Postgraduate Network many, many years ago now, and he was presenting on these concepts when we were still at uni and studying together. And I was in a whole different kettle of fish, but I loved everything that they were working on, and they were all focused on how to make things more equitable and accessible so that they can address these needs to give people the gold standard of care. And I would always say, okay, now when are you going to make money? And the guys would always just feel like, it's not about the money, it's about doing good. And my response every single time was, you can do both. And when they decided to continue this on through and get some funding, they needed a bit of help going out to community, which is where I was working for different areas of my mahi. And I said, sure, I will sign up. I will help you guys reconnect with community, get some real on the hands learning about how people live with diabetes, the stories that are out there, and whether they really want your technology or not. Because if they don't want it and don't care for it, well, you're not going to make the money I thought you would. And once I had signed the dotted line, Jake, who is our CEO, turned around and said, how could you leave us? You see how much great work we're doing. Why not come on as a co-founder? And I was just like, as a data scientist, what do I do in this company? And we just spent about 2 years out on the road. And just this year, when we officially formed the company, I discovered regulatory, which to 99% of the population is about as boring of a job that anyone could even think of. And I love it for all the wrong reasons. I mean, Charles, you saw me when I was a MC. I'm a little bit unhinged sometimes in the best ways. And regulatory for me, it's like I'm a gamer, and so I've just gamified the whole entire process. So I see this as the ultimate D&D quest, and I'm like the game master, and I set up all the rules and all the side quests, which kind of is like our policies, procedures, and our documentation. And I'm like, I send all my engineers off to go fill these off, and if they succeed in these quests, we get one step closer to real money returns. So yeah, I've just been having a blast nerding out in this space, learning something new. And I think it's just because I love the team I work with as well. They're like some really, really amazing guys.
What a great way, what a great way to frame your role, have it gamified. I mean, how much easier are the days if you've got a gamified role in a tech company. Fantastic. Yeah, so going back to the diabetes side, so you guys spend a lot of time on the road working with folks in rural communities to figure out, to what you said, do they want this? Is this a solution that they're interested in? Because which I resonate with, because you speak with a lot of people who have great ideas, but until they've been vetted and validated by people, the end user, or even people that are going to get that thing to the end user, it's not really, a fruit, a doable task.
Yeah, it's a real.
So what was the kind of feedback and consultation that you guys got during that time?
Well, I can say when we were first talking about who to take out into the community was probably like our first big. 'Cause we only had so much money.
Mhm.
And there were some people who were super eager, and everyone was just some people who were just like, oh, I don't know if I'm the right person to take. And I was just, they're like, they cared. They just were afraid to upset someone in the community. And I'm like, because you care, you need to come. And so I kind of like did a little vetting of our team. People have got kids and commitments and stuff like that. So we kind of scheduled who was most available at times. And when we got out there on the road, I don't think the engineers were used to ever really seeing what it's like to be that rural, that remote, to be the middle of nowhere and hear some of the stories that we heard. And some of the most shocking ones is like, we're used to decent care, particularly when you're a student, you at least have access on the same campus. We were hearing stories of people who have to travel an hour or an hour and a half for a 15-minute checkup when they don't even have a rego and a warrant on their car, and they've got other commitments, and they're like, that's one way. It's nearly a 2 to 3 hour return drive, and that's if your 15-minute appointment is on time. It's not realistic for us. So sometimes we don't go to it. And so people are just like, wow, how do you find out information? And they're like, we just guess it sometimes. And then we go to other parts of the community, and we're hearing stories where people have to wait 9 to 12 months before they can even see their doctor. And that's a lucky if you can see it. And if they have an infection, they have to travel to a completely different town in order to go to an after hours or an emergency centre just to be able to get basic treatment. So on that front of just hearing what it was like for some rural communities and accessing healthcare in general was very eye-opening to a lot of the team. But the bits that really got the team, and I think is what's locked most of us into being able to commercialize this and has driven that passion behind all of this, is hearing the stories of pain and loss. And we were in one group and we're in the room, and everyone was just talking about how normal it was for their parents or their aunts and uncles to chop off their legs and their arms and wheeling them around in wheelchairs, and how hard it is on the marae to wheel them, across the grass to try and even get them into different parts, all because of diabetes, but that's all they knew. And so that was just normalized for them. And of course, my team can't imagine having so poor control of your health and having no support around you to manage it,
Hmm.
that you end up in that situation. And
Mm.
it was completely just like heartbreaking. And when we would debrief at the end of the night, they were just like, it was heartbreaking to see that something that horrific and that life changing for these people is completely normal. And, that's what we're like, these devices can change that. And so that's when we kind of all just locked in saying, let's get serious about commercializing this and making that runway to market, because it is a legitimate life changer for a lot of these people. And there was another heartbreaking story that I think is one of the ones that stuck with me the most. And it was about a young girl who was diagnosed as a child, and these devices are particularly very expensive. And she wasn't eligible at the time to have pharmac funding. And so the device is around 8 to 10 grand. Her parents are middle class, they couldn't afford to pay for these devices out of their pocket. Their daughter's struggling with their management. They're terrified on sending her to school.
Mm.
And it was just a real horrible time. And unfortunately for this little girl, her father died as a result of a work accident. And the compensation meant that she could finally have a pump, which meant her mum didn't have to worry about her when she's at school, because it also provided the measurement tools as well. So she got to live a normal life now at the expense of having no father for the rest of her life. And
Yeah.
so when it comes to things around accessibility, it's like those are the stories that really stick with us and resonate with us, is why we want to try and give part of us, like our solution, away for free, so that way that accessibility barrier is lowered a lot more for a lot of these communities, because you shouldn't have to lose anybody for something in the medical space to be accessible. And it's like
Mm.
these on the road stories is what really hit home for so many of us. And so we were just like, hearing them and seeing them, how can you not go further? How can you just abandon it in the research space and being like, oh, well, it's someone else's problem? It hits too close to home now.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes. I mean, you can't get more, translated from the abstract to the real world than actually meeting people face to face and hearing stories for yourself, as opposed to, black and white on a page,
Yeah.
written text. I can imagine the fire that would have given your team to go, no, we need to make this a reality. We need to make this happen, would have been just burning red, white hot at that point.
Oh, and
Um,
yeah, definitely 100%. And it's just like we have been all systems go ever since. Been like, we see their faces, we know what they were. How
mm.
soon can we get these in their hands?
Totally. And the access gap is really, as technology evolves and technology becomes more advanced and more personalized, and by virtue of that more expensive, the gap between the haves and the have-nots and the rural, say, urban divide just widens, doesn't it? I mean, and if
Definitely.
you don't have some people that are willing to actually bridge that gap, then there are going to be people that miss out, not because of any fault of their own, just because of circumstances of where they live or what part of the country they're in, and that's not the world that we want to live in, is it?
Yeah.
That sounds very
That's
almost Orwellian.
that was pretty much the big push on our software education support side of things is, yeah, not everyone has access to the right doctor and nurse in a frequency that would be easily accessible for a lot of them. So we're like, okay, why don't we just put it in their pocket, so that way it's accessible. And a lot of people, because of there's a lot of stigma around diabetes as well. Everyone thinks, oh, you must have gotten fat and therefore you're a diabetic, when in reality it's a whole different kettle of fish. And so some people don't like to talk about it, and so they don't express it and they don't know how to talk about it. But if you can do it in the comfort and safety of your own home or in your car or whenever you want to deal with it, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to access that information and take care of yourself.
Because I forget where I read it, but I think working in the medical field, we forget how little interaction most people have with a healthcare system or with someone in healthcare, right? I think it's minutes a year for the average person, and that is even less if you live rurally,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you don't, and for something that if I imagine, I don't know diabetes that well, to be honest, as a as a disease, but I can imagine if you don't manage it very well, the risks of that are pretty severe and can snowball pretty quickly. I mean, you mentioned amputations if you get like ulcers and lack of blood flow, and then all the other
Blindness as
secondary
well.
effects. Yeah. So having access for a few minutes every few months to someone knowledgeable, not great.
Yep. And I think we've seen a lot of this, and it's just understanding also really that tech knowledge. Like, not everyone's tech savvy. You can throw one of these at almost any millennial these days, and they're like, easy. But when we start looking at those older generations, or maybe people that haven't had as much access to technology over time, how do we make it easy and simplified to ensure that different forms of accessibility? And so one of the reasons I jumped onto this project as well on a personal front, other than everything else, is because I have my grandparent generation is there's a few diabetics in there, and I just remember this one time when I was at a marae at a tangi, and there's a couple of my grandparents, and they are all like kind of measuring themselves. There's one biscuit left, and they're just sitting there, and they're all guessing this number, and I didn't know what this meant. And then they all prick themselves to measure it, and they're like, haha, I got the closest. And they got the last biscuit. And I was just like, okay, cool. My parents and grandparents are gambling with their diabetes and being able who can guess the best measurements in order to have the last biscuit. And as funny as it is, it really just goes to show that, some people completely understand their things, and there were certain grandparents who are like, I guess this number, and it was nowhere even close. And then some of the other grandparents are like, that's bad.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
but you don't know what you don't know, and making things accessible not only in a technology front, but also being able to understand what's coming to you in a text message or an email, making sure that that language is still appropriate for every average day person as well is
Yeah.
very important.
So the solution really here, if I can summarize it, and you can tell me if I've really gleaned enough knowledge, Dr. Grace. Um, so the solution here is really, one is access, so the cost, so making the expensive part of the device free, but the ongoing consumables, patients will have to pay for that. So it's an ongoing, almost like subscription
Yes. Yeah.
type cost, which I think most people these days are very familiar with and happy to pay less upfront and more over the long term. That's kind of the way the world is going, a la Netflix and all the other subscriptions that one must have in this modern world. And the other thing is the accessibility around information. So that technological information to use something a little bit more higher risk, like an insulin patch pump is more risk than a daily injection or a multiple daily injection. It requires a bit more management, a bit more information, but having that in a palatable, accessible, both in a information, but digestibility of the information and actionability as well. How
Yeah.
did I do out of 10?
That's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Top of the class of one.
Gold star.
So yourself, you're the chief regulatory officer. You mentioned CEO. Who else do you have in the team that are putting this together?
So we also have Connor Benton. So he's coming in as our CTO. So he's come from a background of designing for manufacturing. So he's making sure that these little devices that we have are legitimately designed in a good way in all the design files. So that's a huge part of his role. We also are kind of onboarding a few other people. So someone that's coming out of my own consultancy and is following me through is Narelle, and she will be working with me on the quality management system. And it's because everyone thinks, oh, it's fine, it's medtech, it's that thing you have to do at the end, not realizing regulatory and quality management systems need to be there from day one. And most medtech companies are lucky to have one person that does both. So we're very fortunate to have two of us starting from the ground. We've spent years working together as well, and she's super passionate about the QMS side, and I'm the reg side, super passionate. So that's our whole nerding out on a daily basis at the moment.
Love it.
And then we've just got some like amazing, phenomenal mentors and advisors, and most of them will be coming on in some capacity, shape, or form when we start the company up. So, yeah, that's just a little team for now, but I mean, we're going places. So watch the space.
Absolutely. Okay, so forward-looking perspectives. So what's next on the cards now? So the company's been formed. You have this fantastic device. You've got your QMS being built, regulatory frameworks being built, manufacturing. What next?
So, what next is hopefully very, very soon we will be opening our official raise to raise a few million. I won't say how much, give or take, just in case people are like, that's a lot or that's not enough. But it takes millions to get devices into market. So, yeah, we're looking at opening a few million, and then that will take us, this is what we call our MVP zero, so our minimal product. And as Jake always says, this is the worst water gun out, because you just press a little button, it lights up, it vibrates, and if it had fluids in it, it's like in millimeters. So we're currently looking at filing a patent at the moment on our actuator of our next version, and it's all about taking that design through, getting regulatory pre-submission ready. So that way, by the end of next year, we will have clearance to say everything is on track to hit our submission for FDA under 510K as a class 2 device.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then, yeah, from there on, it's just a few more designs, real casually. Some hotel trials on people, which is a weird term to use to say we bring in people overnight to do a few trials on them, like as if they're in a hotel. And then
Hmm.
it's just clinical trials and then onto market. It sounds super simple, but highly complex.
Yeah, so that's like 3 weeks away, right?
Yeah, just real casual. Not like it's 4 years, but give or take.
No, that's excellent. I mean, yeah, you need like you said, you need millions to do this stuff because there's so much going on. I mean, we could sit here for hours to talk about what needs to be done, right?
Yeah,
But what I find really really awesome about what you guys are doing, specifically yourself and Neural, is that thinking about the QMS and the regulatory side really really early on. I often think that that's overlooked, but it's the base of the pyramid, right? The wider you can build the base, the taller the pyramid can be, and the
yeah.
greater the volume of that pyramid, which is a lot of people don't think about. It's not just about height; it's also volume, which is really so. Kudos.
I can say when it comes to regulatory, what people don't understand is your regulatory pathway and framework dictates what markets you go into, what type of marketing you're allowed to do at the other end. Most people don't even realize it falls into that category. If you haven't got clearance under regulatory to say something and then you've proven it does it, you're not allowed to claim it in any marketing form. So it's your business plan, it's your strategic plan, it's how you come up with your partnerships, it's your costing behind your budgets. It is
Yeah.
literally the premise of your medical device company. And if you don't have it, good luck. That's probably
Yes.
the biggest thing I can
Yeah.
say.
You don't want to find yourself having to back out of a tunnel that you've just been digging for the last 12 months to go, oh, okay, this is a dead end. We need
Yeah.
to go figure things out and yeah, reframe it. So the 510K, talk us through what that would look like.
So for us, similar devices already exist on the market. What we're doing is just coming in a few days earlier to be able to be a part of an ecosystem that no one else is playing in, which is what makes us fundamentally different. But if you were to be going under FDA and you had a brand new novel device, it's a whole different pathway where you've got to prove you are not dangerous in any way, shape, or form and come up with
Mm.
all these measurements with FDA. But instead, we're just like, okay, well, 510K, it means there is a predicate device and we have to identify that device. That means we're very lucky that these are pretty common devices within that market, because USA makes up over like 45, more than 45% of the global market of devices. So we have standards that say you have to account for your algorithms, you have to know your voltages and all of these different things. There's already entire checklists available of what we have to prove as testing. And that's all really the 510K process really is making sure we've got a quality management system in play, which is ISO 13485 is a whole beast in itself. We're all certified in that in the team of 4 that we currently sit standing. We also all hold certificates in 14971, which is risk management. So those are 2 key fundamental qualifications every medtech startup should have in the form of a certificate, which just tells you we have a system to track everything we need to do as our quality management, and we understand our risks assessments and being able to identify a lot of those in documentation. So that's a big part of it. And then after that, it's our list of checklists, and then there's all these other mystery standards. This is the bit I really like. I feel like a detective some days because I'm like, what is biocompatibility for my devices, and where do I find the regulatory requirements, and has the university paid for the license subscription to let me download this? So it's really coming down. So we've got to think about everything from biocompatibility of plastic touching your skin, how are people going to clean these. We thankfully will not be having any rechargeable element because that's a whole element, but the battery's going to explode. So it's thinking of every single fault you could think of. You have to find every single regulatory framework that sits around it, and you have to prove you meet those standards, and then you eventually handle that paperwork over to FDA at the very end, and then they either say, this is great, yes, you're allowed to sell into the market, or one bad scenario is that you need a little bit more work done before you can sell into a market. An absolute worst case are like, no, your documentation is absolutely horribly and shoddy and there's too many problems with it. No, it's a flat no.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're in that third category, it's a very unfortunate space to be in, because then you have to spend millions and millions of dollars just trying to retest and redo things to bring your documentation up to standard. And that's why it's important to have this all from the get-go on day one, not
Yeah.
6 years down the line.
I mean, in my mind, when I'm thinking about, all of the biocompatibility and the different materials that you're using, and everything has to have some kind of, ISO code name to it. It's just this great big network that is constantly evolving and seemingly never ever increasing list of things that your device must measure up to, whether it be individual aspects or the components, right?
Are you a gamer by any chance?
No, I don't have time. I've got a 3-year-old. I don't have any spare time.
Unfortunately for you. So if you are familiar with games, particularly like RPGs, where you have customizable characters, so you would pick your hair type and you would pick your skin type and your race or creed or whatever. When I say I gamify my job, I'm not kidding, because it's kind of what we have to do the same. We have to think of every user. So we have to think of where body placement may be for this. So do I have a hairy character or not? Is there a difference between males and females? So for insulin dependent people, a woman going through her menstruation cycle affects her ability to actually metabolize insulin and the way in which she does things. So just gender comes into play in the use of these devices. If you're a fit, active athlete, what comes into play? We have to go right down to comorbidities, to whether the different adhesion on the stickiness of what we're going to be selecting, is that going to be compatible with people? Because I have allergies to a lot of the adhesives, and I've tried some of the test patch pumps, and my skin burns within 5 minutes, and I'm left with chemical burns. And I'm like, oh, good thing I'm not a diabetic, because I could purchase them, but I would suffer severely as a result of them. And these are the things we think of every possible character that could be using these, from physical appearance all the way down to cognitive ability. And we have to figure out how this device will interact amongst all those people. So, yeah, I guess I should have been a gamer developer in another life, but
Yeah.
I just missed the skill to actually code something.
So once you get through the 510K process and you've got a registered device, I mean, then you can market it, right? Are your claims that you can make for this device limited to the predicate device that you have linked to, or can you substantiate your own claims as well?
So that's a part of what your regulatory strategy is whether there's a big difference to say my device is as accurate as or more accurate than. So At the moment, we've done some benchtop testing, which is showing we are as accurate as everything on the market. And for some specific devices, we're more accurate then. And so, little things that we're looking at in our strategy is what claim do we want to make in addition to what we have to do? And do we want to be able to say we're better than everybody else on the market? Because do we want to actually put that as an advertising thing? And in America, I mean, do you want them or do you want to join us on the ultimate journey? Be
Totally.
better, do better, join us. And yeah,
Right.
and that's
And
what
so
it really
you'll have
comes
to
down to.
substantiate that at some point, right?
Yes, yeah. And so for the first maybe year and a half, a lot of it's what we would call benchtop testing. And you get lots of cool little gizmos and gadgets and the equivalent of like a microwave or little boxes. I have no idea what they're called because it's not my job, thankfully, where they create like little mini climates. So, you look at humidity and pressure to mimic whether you're on a plane or if you were scuba diving, how far you can go, water submersion. We get to pretty much purchase all of those real cool tools and see how far we can push these devices and how we break them. And we have a pretty diverse team. So, like, we've got hunters, we've got gamers, we've got swimmers, like people who are in all these different diverse spaces. So, every time we kind of come together and we look at a device, we think about all the favorite things we like to do and how could we break these. I'm the
Hmm.
ultimate breakable person. If you ever need something to break, hire me. But it's looking at all of those claims, making those claims, providing data evidence and backing it up. So that way, when we submit, the FDA can approve or disapprove. That's another element to it. And if they say, yep, you can make that claim officially, then try and stop me from screaming, we're better than everybody else. Buy us, we're cheaper. We're far more
Yeah.
accessible. It'll be far more better. But it is a very complex process. You're usually looking at a lot of mistakes some people make is that they don't go in early enough for a pre-submission meeting. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to get to a point where you've done most of your documentation, you've got your QMS partially set up or mostly set up, you've got your regulatory strategy for the most part set up, everything's relatively underway, and you think you know what your rest of your plan is. You
Mm.
then set up a meeting with them. They kind of overlook your plan and let you know if there's things they know you're missing or not. And that's a big mistake people make because they think, oh, once I'm past clinical trials, I'll do the documents then. When in reality, they may tell you your 3-month clinical trial is not long enough for your product, and what they would prefer is maybe a longer trial. And so it's a big process to go, sure, pre-submission, validate your plan and your pathway moving forward. You can do more of those along the way as well if need be. It gets a bit expensive because you need a representative over in America that can
Mm.
kind of advocate for you. And then, yeah, once you kind of work through your plan, because you've had pre-submission, you've checked a lot of this out, you've validated a lot of it, nothing should come as a surprise to them because they know what documentation they should be expecting, and it's just making sure your standard is high enough. It sounds super easy, but trust me, it is nowhere near that. It's highly complex and specialized. And yeah, and so then once they approve you, I believe it's about a 90-day clearance between yes, official approval to 90 days for you to be able to officially sell. So it's a 510K gets you swiftly into the market. It just
Hmm.
doesn't mean that the development leading up to that swiftness doesn't take years or millions of dollars of development.
Totally. And what kind of clinical trials will be going into the package that you guys are looking to assemble? So that you mentioned the hotel study, which is great.
Yeah, I always love the term hotel because I'm like, we're just like putting people up in fancy hotels. And I'm like, no, those basically staying in a hospital ward. And I'm like, oh, well, that's
Yeah.
less bougie. But the main clinical trial would be the hotel trial is to test feasibility of these and whether they're actually safe enough to be able to take home. And then the clinical trials themselves will be having people use these. Our current estimate is about a 3-month long trial. So they would be handed 3 months worth of replaceables as well as our brain, and just making sure that nothing bad happens severely during that 3-month period. And as a part of that, there's a thing called an HbA1c, which is kind of a level of where you're at. And that's kind of a measure that they use to identify if you are diabetic, the way in which you're managing your diabetes, but it's averaged over 3 months. So hence the 3-month trial, because we can test them at the beginning, put
Mm.
them on a pump for 3 months, test them at the end of that 3 months, and then if what we claim about these devices and being able to help manage and good, we should see it over a full 3-month period. And that's what that big clinical trial is,
Yeah.
before being able to hit a market.
Excellent. And that's when you want to say we are as good as, or we are better than
That's the
the
one.
others, because your brain is your brain, and I say the device's brain
Yeah,
is so accurate and so good at managing
that's the
that over
goal.
that 3 months. Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. Okay, so that's a pretty. I mean, you guys have got the work cut out for you, don't you? So you guys need to get some money in to
I
make all this
mean,
happen.
yeah, we certainly do. I can say anyone who's kind of come close enough to us to be a part of the team and talk to us, we're a very lovable team. I can say that for the most part. And we have a lot of interest. It's just at the moment we're looking for like our lead investor to lead out the seed round. So we've got a few interested parties that we'll be pitching to. So as long as we don't fumble horrendously in a few months, hopefully we will receive the funding and we'll be all systems go come next year, and we'll be ramping up. We'll be hiring software team, engineers, and working heavily with quality management, regulatory people. I think a huge advantage to our company is the partnerships we've formed along the way. So we've got partnerships where we're doing work in Middlemore Diabetes Centre, because that's the largest diabetes centre in the whole country, and it's got a large diversity of demographics from socioeconomic through to ethnicity and culture. So being able to get that generalization and representation of the country in one place is a pretty good place to start. We've got different supports from like Spark Health, and one of the most amazing supports is one of my mentors, and that's Anne, the director from the Yona Institute here in New Zealand. So they are an organisation that helps with regulatory and QMS setup that is launched out of Germany. And so she hasn't met someone who's taken so fondly to regulatory in quite some time. And so she just really enjoys having someone who will banter with her. And so she's here mentoring me, specifically so I can come to her with all my late night questions and crazy things. But everyone loves what we're doing. And it's not a surprise given what we're trying to achieve. And I think we do have the right team, the right expertise, and the mentors to actually deliver. And for any VC out there, we're your next unicorn. You just don't know it yet because you haven't invested in us yet. I guess that's my message to them.
Yeah. Oh, it's super exciting stuff, Grace, honestly. I mean, it's not as though this would be limited to just New Zealand rural communities, right? I mean, the rural experience, limited access to healthcare, it's not like it's just here. It's everywhere. And everyone can, what am I trying to say? It's been a long day. I apologize. Everyone could do with better managing their ailments. And yeah, I think it's fantastic what you guys are doing. Looking back on the journey to date, would there be anything that you would do differently with the benefit of hindsight?
I mean, if I had more money, I would totally do things a little bit differently. That would be a lot less sleep deprivation. But in saying that, I think we did everything we could. So we've had about 2 million in non-dilutable money spread over the last couple of years, and we have taken that, we've ran with it, we have taken as far as we could with every possible person being like, if you pay for that, we'll be there. So I think in terms of the time frame, we have done amazing. At most, the only thing we would change is if we had the same knowledge we do now, is we would already have MVP 0, so we would be straight on to the next one. But in terms of what we achieved, I don't think we could change it more than we have, because everything has been valuable. It's gotten us to where we are, and we couldn't have got here if we didn't do everything the way we did it. And yeah, other than that, it would have been really great if we had more money, so we wouldn't need to work as much on the side, because this is our side hustle for some of us.
Oh
And
gosh, I can imagine. Yeah.
oh yeah, no, it's like 60 to 80 hour weeks nonstop for a few years. It's great. It's every person's dream.
So what, maybe to finish up, Grace, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs or people that want to get into the commercialization space around medical devices and medical technologies in general?
I think it comes back very similar. So when I was MC at Te Titoki Mataora Health Tech Week, I had pretty much the same conversation with a few people, and I've had the same conversation with a few people since that event. And it's around finding people who believe in you but are not going to pander to you. And it's really having someone who can challenge you. So every single step of the way, we have had people who have straight up said, that's nice, but why? What are your other options? Why have you not taken them? So that we have to justify every single move we make and whether we think it's right. They don't have to agree necessarily, but they want to know that we've made a choice, we've made a logical choice, and it's there because startups like these take years. They take a lot of time, effort, and energy. You need support around you for the days where it's hard, the days where you get lots of no's, the days where you're hearing sad stories, the days where people say the money's just not out there, or you get turned down by an investor. You need someone that you can lean against where they go, it's okay, I still believe in you. How do we overcome this hurdle and keep moving forward? And if you're not focused on how to keep moving forward to achieve your bigger picture, but being ready to pivot when need to, if you don't have people
Mm,
to help pivot, help navigate, and keep you propped up, you're going to burn yourself out real quickly.
mm,
And I do see that a lot of the solo founders. And if people tell you you're not good enough and you can't do it, and the women who I know are going to be watching this podcast, you know which ones I'm talking to you because I met you at these events and I've said the same thing to you, get rid of them. Because if someone is just holding you back for the sake of it and saying you're not good enough, they're not really there to help you grow. And that's the difference of what we've had in our successes. We have had people go, I don't believe in the tech yet, but I want to see what you need to do to make it to this. And what is that leap? And we're like, okay, cool. What is that leap going to be? And
mm,
we've always been challenged on how to better ourselves to the point where we've had people come back and go, when I met you at the beginning, I was like, look at you little delusional researchers in academia thinking you're going to change the world. And they're like, 2 years later, I've seen you guys and they're like, you're genuinely viable. I'm interested in you coming and pitching. And we're just like,
mhm.
yay! So yeah, don't let people tell you you can't unless they have a valid reason why. Surround
Yeah.
yourself with the right people, and honestly, you will go further than you ever really dreamed. It may not be in the spaces you dreamed of, but yeah, you will go far.
Yeah, it's interesting because I ask the same question to a lot of people that I have on the podcast, and they're all fairly similar answers in that they have a really broad network, have people in your corner. I like the way that you framed it. People that are in your corner, but they don't pander to you, or kind of they're willing to give you, to deliver you bad news or grounding news, and just keep at it.
Yeah.
You know, and also, one person said to me, which I found really interesting, was that we overestimate how good something needs to be in order to make an impact, in order to get to the next stage. Doesn't have to aiming for perfection doesn't help anyone. In fact, it's probably hindered more than it has actually moved the needle for a lot of things. So just keep going. Um, Grace, it's been really, really interesting. I am fully on board. If I had a deep pocket, which I don't, sadly, I would be throwing money at you because I think it's so cool. I love the intersection of improving healthcare in general, but also improving the access gap, making things more efficient for people, and having access to modern technology more ubiquitously. I think is a noble pursuit. If people want to find out more about you or Tautoko Tech, where can they go?
Well, like Dr. Phil, I have branded myself as Dr. Grace. So more often than not, you can just Google Dr. Grace if you want to find me specifically. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm at a few different other places as well. But easiest way would be to find me on LinkedIn is Dr. Grace. And if you can't find me, you're in the wrong networks and you need to expand your branches. Otherwise, it's Dr. Grace Walker. But for our website, to follow us along, to see the journey of taking us from a small tech and research down in Otautahi, Christchurch, following our journey on how to take it all global, check us out at tautokotech.com as our website, or otherwise just Tautoko Technology. You can search us up and you can find us on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, I mean, I get to take care of a handful of the posts, and you can try and guess which ones are me and which ones are not me, because my humor shines through in far too many spaces. And we try to make it as entertaining because we're loving this journey. We're having so much fun doing it. It is exhausting, in all honesty, but I mean, at the moment, not a single one of us could imagine doing anything different at the moment. And we can't imagine doing anything different over the next few years either. So we're all in. So feel free to come and join our journey and be a part of the converted of, Tautoko Tech.
Definitely. I will be watching very closely. Awesome. Thanks, Grace.